Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Jurdy. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a professional barrel racer up here in Canada. I do a lot of writing for different sports media companies. Today, though, I'm going to be doing the Zoom interview with Chance Butterfield. It's a little bit out of my element, but the Marcy and the Cloverleaf connection asked me to do it. And we're going to be going over equine nutritional needs for our performance horses. I'll let Chance introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chance Butterfield. First and foremost, I'm going to apologize for this beard I have on. I decided to take on this COVID beard challenge, which apparently isn't advisable from Alberta Health Services. They said that increases your chance of getting COVID, which I'm high risk, so I'm obviously a thinker. So apologize for that. I'm not homeless. I have a home, so just disregard this. My background, I'm a professional steer wrestler up here in Canada. My family's been involved in the performance horse industry for decades and generations. Beef background too. Third generation cowboy. Went to school at Lubbock, Texas University, or Texas Tech University. After that, got into the animal nutrition business. Was in that for about 10 years. I was a dairy consultant and then also consulted on the equine side too. After that, I left and then I got into pharmaceuticals. So full disclaimer, no longer in the nutrition industry, not a nutritionist, but I do have quite a bit of background. Not that I know everything, but I've got some helpful tips that might be able to help out some of you guys. So yeah, hopefully I can help where I can. So I guess we can get started with these questions.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. I know that it's not every bulldogger's dream to be helping hundreds of barrel racers. So we did get like close to 100 questions, I think. So I've kind of broken them down a little bit. We'll start right away with your stance on hay testing and feed analysis.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a great place to start. The foundation for every horse's diet is forage, whether it be out on pasture year round in warmer climates, or if they're up here in Canada and part pasture part of the year and then full hay diet the rest. So yeah, it's really important. I know not a lot of people have gotten into testing their hay yet. And I mean, like I come from a pretty old school family too. We take a look at hay. We grow good hay. This is haymaking country out here in central Alberta. Generally take a look at it. It's green, it's soft. You can have some confidence that you're going to get a decent amount of feed value. But with nutrition and the equine industry, like it's gotten so much more refined here over the last, I'd even say like the last decade. The importance of actually knowing what you're putting in front of your horse, it's definitely grown. And so I always recommend people, I mean, go ahead, get your hay tested, find out exactly what you're feeding. And it does, depending on what part of the province you're getting it from. Southern Alberta, you're going to be getting a lot richer hay. They got a lot higher heat units down there. If you're getting alfalfa out of Southern Alberta or Central Alberta, they're two completely different things. Generally getting higher protein down there, higher solubility. Depending on the cut of the hay, that really factors into. There's a big difference between first cut and second cut up here in Central Alberta. And then if you're getting it out of province like BC is even richer. So it's a great place to start. You can, and then when you're getting these tests too, try and get about as good of a representative sample of what you're going to be feeding throughout the year. So if you got a stack of 100 bales, you're going to go along, you're going to take 10 random samples there. Hay probe is generally the best. if you have a nutrition or like say a feed sales rep or a nutritionist that most of them have a probe. If not, you can gather your own samples and take them into a local feed mill. Usually, if you're buying from them, they'll kind of do it as a courtesy. Some of them they charge it. It's not actually a lot. I mean, even if you send off $100 lab sample, if you have confidence in what you're feeding, I think it's completely worth it. Um, so yeah, I highly recommend it, and uh, and yeah, I think everybody should probably give that a try.
Okay, that was one of my other questions. So, your local feed mill, like pretty much everyone would kind of have access, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah, like most feed mills would be happy to do it. I've worked for two different companies, and we've taken them in all the time. I don't think we've ever turned anybody down for a hay sample. So
Okay.
yeah.
Next, I want to talk a little bit just about kind of the breakdown of proteins, fat versus starch-based diets, carbs, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a little bit broad, but we can get started. So, and just in efforts not to get completely down a goat trail, maybe when we talk about proteins, maybe we'll talk about our hay first. I mean, because that's a nutrient that most times I take a look at. I mean, a mature performance horse doesn't really need a whole lot of protein. I mean, if you're out here in central Alberta, if you get a 15% grass hay, just straight grass hay, and decent digestibility, you're looking great. But when you're taking a look at a feed test, 15% doesn't exactly mean that your horse is going to get all that protein. So when you're taking a look at it, you're taking a look at your crude protein, which might be around that 15%, but then you take a look at your soluble protein, and that is an estimate, a percentage of the protein that's going to be rapidly available when it hits the digestive system. So just because you're getting a decent amount of protein doesn't necessarily mean that your horse is going to get all that protein digested. And that's kind of one difference between your first cut and second cut. Up here, the last few years, central Alberta, our first cut has gone on a little bit longer before you've been able to get it off the field than we have in the past. So it starts getting mature, and it starts to be getting a little bit more fiber, a little bit more lignin, and as it matures, the protein, it's just not as available as what it would be in, say, an early vegetative state. That's where your second, your third cut, generally, you'll get some higher levels of protein, but you'll also get higher levels of solubility because that's a younger plant that you're taking off.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. So that's kind of one thing that I take a look at. Take a look at my crude protein, soluble protein, and then you'll probably take a look at the levels of digestible fiber that you have in there. I mean, one thing that a lot of my guys, whether it be horse guys or dairy guys, they like to look for a number. I mean, one in there that you can look just kind of get a ballpark feel for what quality hay is, or what your total digestibility is, like TDN, which is total digestible nutrients. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of a ballpark. Obviously, the higher percentage you get up that around 70% TDN, you're looking at some pretty digestible feed. But that is a sum that is made up of all the rest of the nutrients and digestible fibers and everything else in the analysis. Is just kind of a general number you can take a peek at. But yeah, take a look at crude protein, solubility, and then your digestible fibers. So that's kind of one thing that I take a look at hay. Now, when you're talking about, say, your starches, your sugars, and your fats, so your starches and your sugars, I kind of take a look at those. Like when it comes to supplements and complete feeds, those are those would be your higher NSC feeds, which is your non-structural carbohydrates. You hear a lot of people say NSC all the time. Where your lower NSC feeds would be the ones where they don't have maybe as much, say you wouldn't have like barley, corn, those things, and you'd have maybe higher levels of fat, whether it be flax or rice bran or canola oil or something of that sort, right? So am I getting too far off your question here?
No, no. you're it like more it was asked if like performance horses should be on more of like a fat based diet compared to like a different type of energy which would be the like a like starch, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay. So when, and I believe the numbers are this. So say your fats will have over 2 times the amount of energy that say your starches would. And there's you also get so like your glycogen reserves, which is so your horse has got anaerobic energy, which which will burn up pretty fast, but then you have your glycogen, which is pretty much your energy stored in the muscle. So your horse, your animal, through fat, you will actually get way more glycogen reserves in the muscles through fat than you actually would a starch. So if you're just taking a look at energy, your fat based is better in my opinion. Um,
And if you're looking at the grains, the different grains, so what would be fats compared to starches? So like oats, for example, barley, corn.
like you're talking about the energy levels in those three different types of grains.
Yeah, like those are not fat.
No, they're not fats. So that those are, yeah, those are carbohydrates. So now if we took a look at those three grains, so you'd be taking a look at oats, then you'd have your next energy dense, which would be your barley, and then you'd have your next one, which would be your corn. So the oats are actually um, one of the safest because they aren't quite as hot as the barley and corn. I'm not a big fan of corn. I've honestly never really fed barley. You can see these things fed. I mean, everything is safe within reason. Um, I mean, oats, like we fed them for, shoot, how long have people been feeding oats? Like a Folgers can of oats. We've been feeding it forever, but there are better ways to do it. Um, but like say things with oats, like oats, you can feed it. It'll reach the hind gut, and those starches will digest, and it'll affect that pH a little bit. Now, say your barley, if that's exposed, I mean, because like barley and corn, if it's not cracked, you're not actually going to get a lot of digestion out of it. You'll see a lot of that stuff bypass and go right through the digestive system. No, you're just throwing it away. So if you get it exposed, it's going to slowly start to digest through the intestine, and then it'll also break down in the hind gut as well. But it is a hotter feed, and it will have a greater effect on the microbacteria in the hind gut, and will affect the pH, and will affect other things in the horse's body too. So I've always tried to stay away from those. And I mean, oats you can feed whole. If you can get rolled oats, it's better because you can at least get some digestion of that starch before it hits the hind gut. The biggest thing that you don't want is all of that happening in the hind gut. You want it to kind of
Okay.
be gradual digestion, just to make sure you kind of keep things safe. And actually, one thing that I should probably touch on, it's actually probably one of the most important things about feeding fat. There is a microbacteria population in the hind gut that, I mean, the forage is the foundation of the diet, and you need to make sure that you have good populations of microbacteria that help digest that hay or grass or whatever you have back there. So if you get large amounts of starch or sugars in there, it'll swing that pH, and then it'll actually kill off those populations. Where, say, as a fat, you you actually can keep a pretty good pH in there, and it encourages a good microbiome in the hind gut, and you get better utilization of whatever forages that you have, that you're feeding your horses at the time. It's honestly one of the most important things in my mind when it comes to feeding fat versus non-structural carbohydrates.
Okay. And then what about flax? Whole flax, flax oil, and then ground.
All right, so flaxseed is a really, really good fat. It's actually, that flaxseed's 40% fat. I think in and around there. Um, don't quote me. Yeah, actually, I think you can damn near quote me on that. I think that's 40%. And then it's also high in omega threes, which is great. It's a really good high. It's a really good fat. Now, the thing about it is, whole flax, same kind of thing as, say, the what I was talking about with barley. If that shell isn't cracked, a lot of that's gonna bypass, right? Because it's not actually going to be able to get inside and digest. So that's where a lot of people ground it or grind it. And then when you see it put into complete feeds and supplements, it's all ground when it's stuck in, because you want that to be available. And so yeah, I heard there are some people feeding whole, but yeah, you'd be throwing a lot of it away.
You wouldn't get the benefit of it.
No, no, ground, you need it exposed.
Okay. And then what are your thoughts on peas? We had quite a few questions asking about peas. It's kind of a new feed
Yeah,
up
so
here.
peas, it's another one of those things. People are kind of on the fence about it a little bit. I mean, I've seen it fed plenty. It does have starch in it and does have a decent amount of starch in it. So I mean, it's just like oats. If you're going to feed oats, I mean, be mindful of how much you're actually going to be sticking in there. I personally, and like this is my personal opinion, I just generally try and stay away from starchier feeds or um, starchier grains.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. I think that that covers that kind of area. What I wanted to talk about next is different feeds in Canada versus the US. So our availability, and then just the differences in some of the companies. If you can touch a little bit on that, because I know there's a lot of stuff that's not available to us that they do have down in the States.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to products up here, I know a lot of people always ask, well, why don't we have all these products up here in Canada? Like, why don't we have as many equine nutrition companies up here? And it just comes to it's just a point of demand, right? If you take a look at our total population of horses in Canada, I mean, I think down in the lower prairie states, I think they have substantially more just in a small area than we do nationwide. So you're going to have more people and more businesses trying to capture that larger market. And I think that's honestly the bigger thing, or the biggest thing with it. We do have both. We do have a lot of U.S. companies that are up here, multinational companies that are up here in this marketplace right now. Like, I won't say any names. I won't be dropping any names. But that being said, I mean, just because it's a U.S. based company doesn't mean that it's the best. Up here we do have great nutrition companies. We have great nutritionists, and we have the same research that are backing the decisions when these guys are making supplements and complete feeds. So just because we don't have as many players in the game doesn't necessarily mean, actually it doesn't mean that we don't have that quality, because we do have that quality. And actually I'm involved with two different companies here right now, and both of them are absolutely top notch. I put my name behind them any day. Actually both technically, I guess I am. But yeah, we have great players in this market up here in Canada. But that being said, you do definitely need to do your research, because I have seen plenty of feeds out there, and I mean, shoot, one company that I work for, there was one in there. I don't even think it's on the marketplace anymore, and it was like a heavy duty sweet feed that was geared towards like your top end performance horses. And like the science out there right now would push back against it for a high performing horse. So it's no longer available. So you just got to do your research. You got to take a look at your analysis on these labels. You got to take a look at, and I mean, it's tricky too, because you're taking a look at your ingredient list, but they're not necessarily in order of inclusion. So just because you see something in there with that might, like, say, maybe might have molasses, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It might be in there for a purpose of binding. It might be in there for purpose of palatability, but it might be in there at such a small amount, it's not really going to have a significant impact on your um, horse's digestive system. And there are actually, like, there are there are some starter feeds out there that are still within the realm of safe, but I just I just know that there's more benefit elsewhere myself personally. And like I just needed to, like, full disclaimer again, these opinions are my own.
The next question that I wanted to talk about, I can kind of weigh in on both sides of it. I feed like a complete feed now, and I supplement, but I have done kind of the homemade route where I was feeding 4 times a day and I was weighing everything and I was giving almost a dozen different items. And it was kind of barrel racer madness, but it's what we had to do when I was working with the nutritionist and I couldn't get the feed up here. What are your thoughts on feeding like a complete feed, like processed diet compared to doing it homemade?
And I think you kind of nailed it a little bit on the head when you're talking about making your own diet. You had a nutritionist behind you, and I think that's the key. Both have their value for sure. There are fantastic complete feeds out there that have been put together by some really brilliant minds, and there are nutritionists out there that are helping people make their own diets. Like if I take a look at the dairy industry, which I worked for years, um, we we had our own in-house nutritionist. We worked and we made our own complete feeds, and then we had guys that just straight up commodity fed, but everything was formulated and ration balanced properly to hit certain nutrient specs. So just because like just because you're making your own diet, if you have the knowledge behind it and you have the support there, you can do a great job. It's more work, obviously, and probably going to
There's a
cost
lot of work.
sanity. But no, there's benefit there. But at the same time, I mean, there's benefits to those manufactured feeds too. I mean, especially when you get your stuff from a good reputable company that puts a serious emphasis on quality control. I mean, there are some out there, and I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of money that they drop into their manufacturing and the money they drop into their incoming ingredients. Like a lot of this stuff is human grade, so you can have faith in it. Just you need to do your research. Make sure you pick, if you're gonna make your own diet, get a good nutritionist, and then if you're going with a good complete feed and a supplement, do your research. Make sure that that they got the knowledge behind themselves. And I mean, there are just some great companies out there.
Thank you. That and so the reason that I was doing that, like I couldn't get the feed up from the States, but she could only be on that feed because she had issues, like problems. So that was another kind of common question is how do you feed these horses that have Cushing's, that might have ulcers, tying up, bleeders, that kind of thing, like feeding them as an individual.
Yeah. So, and I mean, you said it right. I mean, horses are individuals, and there are general rules of thumbs, just like human nutrition. I mean, there are proper ways to feed, as there are proper ways for people to eat that are going to be able to cover your greater population. But when it comes to certain, say, individuals with specific metabolic problems or medical issues, then you need to take a closer look at, and it needs to be a little bit closer, like look, or like it needs to be a little bit more tailored specifically. Now, the issues with cushions, I actually had a lady off there contact me, and there's a feed company that I worked with in the past. She actually got in contact with, put a ration together, and I took what she had, talked to one of my colleagues at that company, and she was pretty much spot on. She was able to actually ration balance that because they had a variety. They didn't have just one general product. They had a multiple set of, or they had multiple products in order to kind of tailor to different kind of horses. So
Yeah.
they were able to adjust. But now, say like bleeders, that's a completely different ballgame, because and I mean, it's one of those things I even hate talking about, because I mean, there's one really, there's a really good vet that's been in the industry for I don't know how long, and I respect him probably more than anybody, and he's actually got his master's in nutrition too. And there's nothing really concrete out there that's saying exactly what's causing it. I've seen horses with some pretty loaded diets that are bleeders, and I've seen some that are just on bare bone, I mean, straight grass hay. That's maybe not the greatest, and they're still bleeding. So, I mean, you take a look at Lasix; they're not even 100% sure exactly why Lasix works on bleeders. There are some things that people have found that have maybe mitigated a little bit, but I mean, you got to talk to those nutritionists and see exactly what their thoughts are on it and why they decided to do it. I'm pretty sure there are some people that have had some successes, but I don't know exactly what the answer is to that. Now, with some of these other ones, and I know there's some questions on some horses very specifically, those situations, those are going to require a phone call and going to require your veterinarian or nutritionist to actually take a close look at these animals, and you're going to have to make a roadmap here on how exactly you're going to treat them. And that's kind of one thing. I feel bad because I'm not going to be able to answer those. Like I do, anybody that that posted a question on here that I didn't answer, 100% send me a direct message through Messenger or my email, or you can get my phone number. And if I can't help you, I have got nutritionists that I have worked with in the past that are outstanding individuals. I'd be more than happy to give you a hand. So don't suffer in silence. Absolutely give me a call. And if I can't help you, I'll make sure that somebody can.
Yeah. Thank you. That it is such a roadmap, and it's not a straight line for all of those. Like there's always cause and effect, and yeah, so we have to treat them a little bit like individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that I was wondering, how many feedings should they get a day?
So if you take a look at the way horses evolve, they're a grazing animal. So practical, like life situation, we're all working midday. So I mean, most people were able to get away with 2 feedings morning and night, which is fine. Now, for an animal that's supposed to graze, if you can get yourself like an eco net and they can actually pull at that hay all day, it's the best thing for them. If you are one of those people that can get home 3 times in a day, or if you're home 3 times a day, feed smaller feedings. I mean, take that 20 pounds of hay and shrink that into 3 even amounts.
A lot of us have some home time right now, so
Yeah,
it's a good time to get your nutrition program on par. That's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. No, well, I mean, that's true, I guess. Nobody has any excuse not to feed their horses properly until at least April 31st. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
8
No,
feedings a day.
you actually should be able to sit there and actually hand fork your horse hay throughout the day.
All
But
day long.
I'll wait until we actually see the first person post a video of that. Straight 5 hours of feeding your horse. So, no, the more you can spread those feedings out throughout the day, the better. Obviously, I mean, life is what life is, and we're not able to do that. You do the best that you can. But if you
Yeah.
can get a RecoNet or some other device like it that at least spreads that hay out throughout the day, that's perfect. And then,
Okay.
yeah, if you can put your grain feedings, if you can spread those out too, that's great.
Okay. I think that we covered pretty much everything that was on there. And like you said, like the girls can contact you if they do have any questions that we didn't cover. So I think pretty much we should just kind of like summarize. So the best place to start is probably to get your hay tested if you are building a program.
100%. I mean, we spend the thousands of dollars a year on vet bills for our horses. We know what nutrition can do for people, and we know what nutrition does for athletes. Your horse is 100 times the athlete that any person is. If you're going to spend that money on your vet bills, spend your money on your nutrition. Spend that money on testing. Spend your money on good feed, whether it be something that you're picking up from a good nutrition company or something that you're making on your own under nutritionist supervision. Yeah, and honestly, that's honestly going to do nothing but good for the health of your horse. Money that you're going to drop into your horse's nutrition is probably going to save you at the vet. I can actually tell you that firsthand.
I can also tell you that.
Yeah,
I
that's right.
agree. Okay, I think we kind of covered it all. Thank you very much for doing this. Like I said earlier, like this isn't the ideal way you want to spend your Saturday night, but we do appreciate it.
Well, it's always a thrill to talk to a bunch of barrel racers. So nothing fun that I can do on a Saturday night. But
Yeah.
no, I just want to throw in an apology. I know there's about a million questions on there. There's a few people that contacted me directly. It was great. So anything that we didn't answer, get in contact with me. If I can take a look at it objectively, give you an answer, great. If not, I will absolutely get in contact with one of the colleagues that I've worked with in the past, or one of the nutritionists that I've worked under, and we'll make sure that at least you get some good answers, or the best that's out there here right now.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
one
Oh,
last thing I will say that it always drove me crazy, and I think everybody in the nutrition industry could probably agree with this. When you guys do pick up, say, your mineral or your complete feed, take a look at the label. There are some minerals out there that are made to be free choice and they're formulated as such, but the vast majority of them are made for a daily amount of intake per percentage of body weight of the animal a day. So don't overlook that. That label's not just out there to check the boxes for CFIA or whatever regulator that you have. Go through there, take a look at it, feed your horses appropriately. Underfeeding them is not going to do anything good, and overfeeding them can have some negative effects too. So if that was my one frustration from the industry, which that's a lie because I had a million, but that would definitely be one. So
yeah.
if anything, definitely feed as per label. And if
We're not the best at following instructions, so that's a
well, I
good.
mean, if you're curious, if you think that you do need a little bit more, there is a phone number on there. Call your nutritionist, tell them your situation. You can make adjustments because a lot of good or feed companies out here don't just have one feed anymore. They have they have multiple feeds and they have multiple supplementations on top to try and actually target these individual horses, and they are going to great lengths to treat horses as individuals now. So
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll we'll post this. I'll post this as soon as I can and get it to the girls.
sounds good. Hope I didn't trigger anybody.